We're live. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I will call to order the budget workshop for City of Beaumont Council Administration for Budget 2023 for the next 3 evenings from 5 o'clock till 9, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Same bat time, same bat channel. And we always start off our meetings with a land acknowledgement, which will begin now. We are pleased to be here today, traditional territory of Treaty 6. We acknowledge all those who share a deep connection with this land. The City of Beaumont respects the histories, languages, and cultures of all of Canada's First Peoples, whether they be a First Nation, Métis, or Inuit descent, and appreciates that their presence continues to enrich Canada's vibrant communities. As we gather here today in the traditional territory of Treaty 6, we acknowledge that we are all treaty people, and we have ongoing responsibilities to protect and honor all of life. Next on our agenda is item 2, adoption of the agenda. Ms. Winter, are we prepared to adopt the agenda, or are there any amendments to the agenda?
Thank you, Mayor. Administration is proposing the following changes to the agenda. Updated version of the 2023 proposed budget, addition of attachment 4 to item 3A, the proposed budget overview. Move item 6, operating budget discussion, to commence prior to item 5, capital budget discussion.
Thank you very much. Is a member of council willing to move the adoption of the agenda as amended? Councilor McCook? Kat, you have the floor.
I'll move that the November 30th, 2022 council budget agenda be adopted as amended.
Thank you. Discussion on the motion, council? Seeing none, before I call for the vote, Kathy, are you with us remotely?
Yes, I am.
Good, thank you. So I'll make sure you're okay with your sound for the meeting here. So with
Thank
that,
you.
council, please vote on the motion of the agenda. Councillor Barnard, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you. Council carried unanimously. Thank you very much. All right. 3A, proposed budget overview. We are now into our meat and potatoes of the budget. We're starting to get our process going here. So 3A, proposed budget, item 4. Item number 1, 2023 proposed budget updated. Mr. Blanco, would you be speaking this evening on that? Or Mr. Dow?
Mayor Dowlick and Curtis, do you mind if I just say a couple things first?
Please proceed, Mike.
Sorry, Curtis. Just wanted to help set the context here with a few bullets real quick. And Curtis, if I steal your thunder, I apologize right now, but I'm at home and safe, so you can't do anything to me. This really, after a year in office, is your first budget to dig into, and we really encourage you to do that. The process tonight, I will almost guarantee you, is going to start off disjointed and bumpy and feel like it's clunky, but then we're going to hit a rhythm, and you're going to see how things start to roll along. So be patient with all of us, because every year it brings something new. You're going to learn through this, and we've been trying to present that Beaumont as a city is significantly undertaxed. That has put us at a significant disadvantage and is going to require some fairly high tax increases over the next several years, and or some increase in our non-residential tax revenue, which is what we've been trying to do for many years here. And things like the Innovation Park are an opportunity to do that. So we need cash. And Mr. Dowler talks, when we talk about budgets and stuff, he talks about a day of reckoning. Our city is getting so big in residential tax and residents, and we've talked about that before, about a buck that we receive in tax revenue from a resident typically costs us $1.40 to keep them going. So do the math, it doesn't work. Lastly, I'd like to thank everybody who's been involved in the process so far. This, Sam talks about this being his favorite time of year, and it is an exciting time. And there's a lot of work that goes into it. It's all done with the best intentions. Nobody's trying to hoodwink anybody here. This is your budget. But I want to thank the administration for all of the work they did to get us to this point. I want to thank council for submitting your questions and receiving same. There's a lot of thought put into that, and we certainly appreciate it. With that, I will turn it over to the person who knows a heck of a lot more about finance than I ever will. Thanks, Curtis. Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Just hang on, Mr. Dollar, before you begin. I was going to make some comments after the initial. I'll just start right now instead. So as Mike, our CEO, mentioned, this is budget time is always very important, and this is probably the biggest job we have as a council is doing budget, because from budget, everything comes from budget. Everything comes from tax collection and services to our residents. So this is probably the biggest job we have any given year. It's an exciting time. It's a frustrating time. It's a lot of information to absorb and understand and see all the moving parts of a budget. It's not as easy as people think it may be to do a budget, but it's part of our job as councilors. So administration did a great job putting the package together. And we'll spend the next 3 days or 3 evenings, not days, 3 evenings, picking the budget apart and doing our role and make sure we are comfortable with what's going forward for 2023 for our residents. So with that, Mr. Dowler, you're welcome to take the floor, sir.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Daniluk. Just wanted to take a few minutes to get everybody up to speed and onto the same page in terms of the overview of the budget process itself. The 2023 proposed budget was, of course, introduced to council at the November 8th meeting. The proposed budget did reflect administration's best efforts to provide a balanced budget that supports our current service levels and addresses the city's most urgent priorities. Following that introduction on November the 8th, council did express some concerns with the presentation of the proposed budget document itself. So administration did do some further work to reframe that document. The updated proposed document was dated November the 10th, was provided to council electronically and published on the city's public website prior to this meeting. Today's agenda package does include both the original November the 8th proposed budget document, as well as the updated document dated again November the 10th. The updated document will be the one that we do refer to throughout the course of the next 3 days of budget deliberations. The document can be found starting on page 3 of the agenda package. At the November 8th meeting, council also passed a motion directing administration to provide some further information on several items. Most of the additional information was addressed as part of the updated budget package. 24-hour policing, you'll find on page 39 of the document. Additional firefighters on page 40. Enhanced snow removal, page 41. Spray park design work on page 109. One outstanding item was a one-pager or a service request concerning a community services worker volunteer coordinator. This information can be found on page 179 of today's agenda package. As in previous years, after the introduction of the proposed budget, council was invited to submit questions to administration. And as Mike did mention, we do appreciate those questions. So thank you very much for taking the time and submitting those. Administration's responses to those questions were circulated to council in advance of the meeting tonight and are included again in today's agenda package starting on page 335. Council currently has the next 3 days planned for budget deliberations, as the mayor mentioned, and additional time held next week should it be necessary. Our aim is to work with council to address any amendments to the proposed budget so that an updated 2023 proposed budget can be presented to council at the December 13th meeting. As in previous years and throughout the course of any council meeting, our legal and legislative staff are here to help guide the process and support members of council who want to propose motions to amend the budget. On a final note, budget deliberations also includes time on the agenda to deal with any subsequent motions that may be required. And subsequent motions, just as a reminder, are typically motions directing administration to prepare future reports on matters relating to the budget, but not essential for the approval of the budget in front of council. A good example of this may be if council wanted more information on an analysis on a particular program or service level, but having that information not being critical to passing the budget. Typically, council will leave the subsequent motions until after the budget deliberations on capital, operating, and utilities have concluded. For today, our intention is to provide council with a bit of a recap of the budget and to ensure that council has some time to address any outstanding questions of clarification. Council will also have the opportunity to hear from the library on their proposed 2023 budget, which is scheduled for 6 p.m. And of course, we will also ensure we take a dinner break around 6:30. And I think that's about it in terms of process. I'd be happy to answer any questions on the process itself before I turn it over to Mr. DeBlanco.
Thank you, Mr. Deller. Any questions from council on what Mr. Deller went through a moment ago before Mr. DeBlanco begins his extensive work this evening? Seeing none, Mr. DeBlanco, are you ready to go? Let me get your mic hooked up there. You're good to go, Curtis.
Thank you. Good evening to the mayor and council. As the information has already been presented on November 8th and council since had the opportunity to go through as well as ask questions, I won't spend much time, but I will do a quick recap of the proposed budget as we see the presentation on the screen. Next slide, please. One before that. There we go. All right. So the city's budget is divided into 3 distinct budgets. We see them on the screen there. The first one being the municipal operating budget. This is the tax supported budget and supports the tax supported services of the city. These are things like recreation, protective services, road maintenance. The second being the utility operating budget. Very similar an operating budget, but instead of taxes, the utility operating budget is funded by utility rates. Utility supported services are water, wastewater, curbside collection, and stormwater drainage. The operations of this budget support the repair, maintenance, and replacement of utility infrastructure. And once again, this is funded entirely from the fees on ratepayers' utility bills. And lastly, the capital budget. The city's capital budget provides renewal and replacement of the city's assets, as well as response to growth-related needs in the city through numerous projects. The renewal budget is funded by the city's reserves, which are allocated or provided allocations by both the municipal operating and utility operating budget, whereas the city's growth budget is often funded from capital grants, offsite levies, and debt, and some other mechanisms. Next slide, please. So municipal operating. If one wanted to understand the proposed changes to the city's budget in one page, page 9 in the proposed budget document would be the go-to. If we zoom in specifically on that page, but the top section, it's entitled Maintaining Services. This proposed budget reflects a 2.8% impact, which we can see in the bottom right corner. It's a little small, but it's a 2.8% impact to maintain city services. Inflation has certainly been a key factor for the city when we're discussing the city's ability to maintain services. These pressures are faced through items such as utilities, personnel costs, materials and supplies, including the impact of fuel prices. Next, growth. So Beaumont has seen the tax base grow by 3.5% in 2022. Responsibly allocating growth-related revenue is important to offset growth-related pressures. We can get the next slide, please. So growth-related pressures that have been allocated resources in this proposed budget include resources to work collaboratively within the region, growth in physical office space, as well as resources to prudently financially plan for the growth of the city. These items reflect 1.6 of a tax impact, and when the net impact of growth becomes 1.9. And this, when utilized to offset some of that 2.8 in the prior category, the subtotal of these is a net amount for maintaining services as well as responding to growth of 0.9. The next one, which is impacts of council and other entities. Municipalities are often required to absorb decisions made by past and current councils, other governments, as well as third parties. Impacts within this particular budget constitute 2.6 of the overall tax levy increase. And these are for items such as transit, library funding, and grants for the arts. Next, there are some service enhancements proposed. Recommended in addition are these two key service enhancements for the city that administration does feel are crucial to deliver services to a growing city. Service transformation initiatives are to better enable the city to deliver services to residents, and as well as resources for planning development. These are recommended specifically by the service review that was performed in 2022. Next slide. And one more. So overall, the city's tax increase as proposed is 7.4%. We see the summary in the table at the top. In the past few pandemic years, the city has approved below inflationary tax increase, which has eased the tax burden on ratepayers. One impact of this is a deferral of the impacts of physical growth as well as growth-related pressures. Compounded with rising inflation, the overall tax increase proposed reflects the need to catch up on the services required to service this growing city. Next slide. Overall, the ratepayer impact on tax from a tax perspective is $19.30, and this reflects what the impact would be on a monthly basis for a typical home in the city. For non-residential properties, once again, there's an impact on the monthly basis is $6, and that's per $100,000 of assessed value. The non-residential properties in the city aren't as homogeneous as residential. There's no such thing as a typical business. There's big ones, small ones. So we've shown it as a function of $100,000 of assessed revenue. Next, the utility budget. The proposed utility budget has expenditures of $12 million, and these support the current services as well as deal with growth pressures. This is a 7% average increase to rates and includes the ability for administration to enhance analysis, planning, and future sustainability of utility services. This increase is also driven from increases passed on from commissions, contracted services for solid waste, and transfers to reserves to ensure renewal and replacement of existing infrastructure. Next, the capital budget. We've talked about renewal and growth. The city funds its renewal and replacement programs through its specific capital reserves. And once again, these are contributed to, reserves are contributed to from both the municipal operating and utility operating budget. The proposed budget includes the renewal and replacement of $4.5 million, and that includes items like the Juneau Playground, Spray Park, work at the ELCC facility, as well as infrastructure work in the St. Vital neighborhood. From a growth perspective, the city responds to needs in the community by funding growth-related projects through numerous sources. This budget includes growth items such as the purchase and preparation of a site for a joint high school, renewal of the Centreville Park space at 50th Street and 52nd Avenue, as well as others noted on the screen and on page 88 of the proposed budget document. Next, we'd just like to provide council with a bit of context and overview of a tool administration has used, which is called priority-based budgeting. A lot of the information I'll discuss is included in the budget document as well as in the questions and answers, but we wanted to spend a little bit of time this evening to give council a quick overview. Council may have noticed certain of the service enhancements that are in the budget document have shown in a different manner than in previous budgets. And the reason for this is that these are really requests for resources to either create or expand or enhance a city program. And that term program is going to be used commonly. So rather than requests for full-time equivalent FTEs or increases to operating expenses on contracted service line items, for example, administration is focused on this program level. I'll ask Ms. Mead to put the list of programs up on the screen, which is included as an attachment. I'm not certain which one. I believe it is attachment 2 or item 3A. So it's important to note that PBB, priority-based budgeting, is not a new budget process. Mr. Dowlers has shed some light on what the process is. The process has not changed. Rather, PBB is a tool that has been added to the process in order to aid in decision making. Once again, I'll come back to, rather than requesting FTEs or operating expenses, we're asking for allocations towards programs. And this program level would be one level up from the transactional line item or FTE positions and one level below departments. Once again, priority-based budgeting is not a new process, but a tool. The underlying philosophy of this tool is how an organization can and should invest resources to meet its stated objectives. The hope is that it would allow administration to better articulate why the services the city offers exist, what their cost is, and finally, the value they offer citizens. The tool has been able to provide administration with a different approach and perspective for budgeting as it evaluates the relative importance of individual programs and services rather than entire departments. It's an opportunity to identify and have conversations about the services that offer the highest value, as well as continue to provide funding for them, while on the flip side, potentially justifying reducing service levels or eliminating lower value services. Lastly, the tool allows administration and council to have an enhanced conversation about accountability. With a priority-based budgeting approach, the focus becomes even more on the results that a program produces for achieving priorities. A more traditional budget focus, this is focused on accountability for staying within spending limits. City admin has invested a substantial amount of time into the priority-based budgeting tool to produce the program inventory that's on the screen. The effort and work are reflected in this 2023 proposed budget, and these programs are now identified, reviewed, and current resources allocated to them. Administration does intend to build and continue on this work with the evolution of the PBB process and the PBB principles used throughout the organization. As discussed, priority-based budgeting does have many advantages, and one of the immediate benefits is a shift in thinking from status quo budgets to end results for stakeholders. Also, by defining these programs on the screen, the city shifts from requesting resources for positions to requests that are framed around the programs on the screen and why resources are required. One question in the question and answer document, I believe it was the mayor that asked, is if there were any disadvantages. And one hurdle in transitioning to this type of approach is that it is not a quick switch. It does require a shift in thinking, and administration purposefully did not fully implement PBB in the 2022 budget process. The goal for this year was to have the departments compile their program inventory and to begin socializing the methodology within the organization. Administration is optimistic that taking this approach will ultimately enable council and administration to recommend the best budgets and provide the best possible value to citizens of Beaumont. With that, I'll turn it back to council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeBlanco. Appreciate that. Any questions from council at this point from Mr. DeBlanco and what he presented so far? Seeing no questions? Okay. Next part of our agenda is item 3A3, Community Outreach Volunteer Coordinator. Will that be spoken to by Mr. DeBlanco or another member of administration? Mr. DeBlanco? Oh, hang on. I think your mic went off for a second there. There you go.
Sorry, to the mayor, administration did not intend to present. That item was put forward just as a request, so an item for discussion for council.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. All right. So Ms. Winter, have we gone through with Mr. Blanco's presentation item 5, which is 2023 proposed budget presentation? That's been done already, I believe. Ms. Winter?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, we finished that and we would be moving on to 3B, which would be the responses to council's budget questions.
Okay, that's what I thought. Did want to clarify that process. Thank you. So on our agenda now, we move on to 3B, which is responses to council budget questions. So as mentioned previously, council, we had all of our questions sent back to us in written form. Now is the opportunity, if you have any questions any follow-up questions from what you submitted or require any clarification on the questions you did submit and the answer you received back, you require any clarification on any parts of that document. Councilman Newkirk? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you touched your button there. Oh, okay. Think some more. Councilor Tessier, you have the floor now.
Thank you. I just had a question on number 9 on the 2.8% increase to maintenance. So it says it's equivalent to 4 FTEs, but the positions weren't exactly stated. Like, I'm just wondering, would there not be an operator involved in that from what I understand is services in that regard and waste and that type of thing, or what are we looking at? How do we know a percentage, but we don't know the actual positions for it to maintain it?
By any chance, do you have a specific, remember your question, a specific question, you want some clarification on? Well, question number 3, sorry, that's it.
There's a whole bunch of pages here. Page 342.
Page 342.
Page 6 on the actual council questions. Yes. Yes.
RT 29. I see it here. I don't see it on. Okay, I'm looking at the hard copy. Okay, yes, thank you.
I don't have the hard copy.
That's okay. I'm just looking at, make sure Mr. Blanca knows which question you're referring to.
Oh, they're on it. Thank you.
Mr. Dowler.
Sorry, I'll jump in here and try my best. So the 4 positions that I believe you're asking about that are included in 2.8% to maintain services. So I could be off on my numbers here, but I believe there was 2 positions that got added into people services around recruitment, especially. We were challenged by the number of recruitments that were coming forward this year. And so added an additional FTE to handle the additional workload there. The other 2 positions, I believe, ended up in infrastructure, and they were focused on the engineering / development side of the business. And so again, it was help to deal with the additional pressures associated with the increase that we saw in development permits and development in general, and more specifically, though, on the engineering side versus the planning and development tasks that are associated with that. So bringing on those FTEs to deal with some immediate pressures that we had in the organization in 2022, actually, to deal with volume increases.
Yeah, and when I see that 2.8, I would have liked to see, what's attached to that. Just like when I see 2.8% to maintain services, I go directly to like snow removal, cutting grass, like actual things that we're going to see out there. So it would be helpful to know if those are the 4 current ones, and how do we know we need it to maintain services compared to funding and unfunding things?
Sorry, Mr. Dowler, apologize that your mic was still on, sorry.
No, sorry about that. And that's a fair comment, Councillor Tessier. The one thing that I would say, just to clarify from an administrative standpoint around maintaining services, it's really related to all our existing services, both internal and external. But certainly in terms of providing greater transparency around kind of the increases that's causing the 2.8 that you're seeing in the budget document, absolutely, we can take that back and do a better job of providing that information to council and the public for sure.
Great, thank you.
Any further for now? You're good for now?
I'm good, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Barnhart, I see your hand is up, so you have the floor before I go to Councilman Newkirk and Councilman Markowski. Kathy?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question about process, because I'm just not 100% sure. One of the actions coming out of one of my questions that I asked, and it was KB 15 about the electric sign on 50th Street. I would like to propose a motion to be considered about that for a report to come back on what it would cost. I'm just wondering, process-wise, is that something that comes now, or is there going to be a time later where I can do that?
Ms. Boucher, would you care to offer Ms. Winter an answer to Councillor Barnhart?
Thank you, Mayor, through you to Councillor Barnhart. We did respond to Councillor Barnhart's email that she had sent with that inquiry. I'm not sure if she actually received that or not, but we did say that it did sound more like a subsequent motion coming out of budget for a report on those costs.
So we should make that motion after budget workshop is over or during workshop?
It would be after. It would
Subsequent
be
being
down-
after the workshop?
Yeah, it would be down on the 8, but I do want to confirm if Councillor Barnhart wants it to be considered within this budget process, then that would be a different motion we would do for her.
So
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Winter. And I did see your answer, and that is my question, because I don't really feel that it has to come back later. If it could be something that could be brought back again during the conversation around operating budget, I would like to know what that cost would be. But again, I don't know if other motions are coming forward from councillors or what is on people's minds. So I just want to make sure that I don't miss the opportunity now when we're talking about questions, because that was definitely one of the outcomes of the answers that I received from KB 15.
And definitely, and I just want to add to that is administration would not be able to pull those costs right away. We would have to look into that cost. So it's not something we would be able to do this evening without looking into what that cost would be to do that. That's
just anyway, it's one piece of infrastructure that's not functioning at all right now. And I just wonder why we don't have that information, but sounds like, Mayor, if you want me to hold off on that, I will. Your call.
yeah, Council, let's come back to you on section 8 of our agenda, which may not be this evening, but we'll make sure we come back to you for a subsequent motion on that particular piece of infrastructure at a later time. Are you okay with that? I'll make a note here, make sure you don't forget about that for you.
Thank you.
Anything further at this time, Councillor Barnhart?
Not yet. Nope.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Van Newkirk, followed by Councillor Monkoff-Swain, followed by Councillor Tessier. Steve, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. And I think the intent here in this section is to just review and ask questions on our questions, right? You know, we're going to go back to the beginning of the operating budget and then start going through with motions and stuff, right?
Yes, actually, let me clear that to make sure we're okay with that. So to answer Councilman Newkirk's question, the intent of this section now is for council members to expand, clarify questions that were submitted in the process and answers were given back. And once we're done that, we'll continue into the library presentation. And after that, Ms. Whitten is done. After that, we'll continue with this section. Once that's done, we'll then go into the actual operating budget itself. And we'll start on page 9 and we'll go through the top section, maintaining services, then growth and services, followed by impact of council and service enhancement. So we'll go through the page 9 section by section. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's good. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Following up on Councillor Barnhart's question, just to provide that clarity for the room. Yeah, I just wanted to comment on SV 10. So that is on page 34 of the budget document, or 370 of the package. So that question was a long one because I was compiling a bunch of stuff out of the budget, and then I ended with a question, and then that question's answer formulated into a an unfunded one-pager role for the CVO volunteer coordinator position. So on that question, so what I was trying to bring through in that question is we spent a whole bunch of time and energy on our strategic plan, and we came up with 5 aspirations. And aspiration number 4 is a strong volunteer spirit and a warm neighborly feeling. And so what I did in that question is I went through the budget and looked for all of the places that we tied, and maybe I missed one here or there, but for the most part, this is all of the items in the budget that we tied back to that aspiration number 4. And, to be fair, what administration was able to do was a look back as to what are we doing now that might fit into this column? Because, you know, it's an aspiration and we just set the strategic plan. So we need to figure out what are we going to do moving forward. So, you know, that led to the question that I did ask, which is when is it anticipated that the city will require a dedicated resource, i.e. volunteer coordinator, and to drive this aspiration? Because I truly think we need to be able to attribute resource to these aspirations. They were important enough for us to put on our strategic plan. So they're going to need some resource. So, and then the real meat and potatoes of that question was, is the 2023 budget too soon for this, or would it be a good addition? So, basically the long and short of it is that, I asked this question as a check-in with administration around, you know, if council found room in a budget for a position, you know, would it be imposing a position on them that they were ready for? Yes or no? And the answer that I received was good. And, you know, I can appreciate that, you know, the final sentence, administration could absorb the work in 2023 should a new resource be added. So that was the answer to the question for me, Mayor. And I really appreciated the one pager unfunded, because I think, you know, whether it be in this budget or subsequent budgets, I think we're going to need to add this resource in the community. So it was a big question in here, and it had a whole bunch of words, but the question itself was small. So I just wanted to speak to that a little bit as to why I asked that. So no question, just a bunch of comment. So thank you.
That's fine, Councillor. Appreciate that. Next, we'll have Councillor McGowan-Swain, followed by Councillor Tessier. Sam, you have the floor.
Thanks, Bill. I'll go to page 40 of the questions. And I'm going to cheat a little bit here and combine a written question with a previously asked question. So my question was around the dog park. So I submitted a written question about why we don't plow the dog park trail, right? And so the question was pretty straightforward. Why don't we do it? And the answer that came back was because it's, you know, essentially a gravel limestone crush path that if we cleared that, we would basically destroy and ruin that. So subsequently, I asked through this written budget process, you know, how much it would cost to pave the existing trails, and you've come back at 350,000 to 450,000. I don't think, me personally, I don't want to spend 350 to 450,000 to pave these trails, but I just wanted to question the initial written answer around that in terms of clearing them. I know I've been to other paths, other areas across Alberta where, you know, they do clear, and it may not be like a full blade scrape along, but at least, you know, they can adjust the brushing level. And I don't want to get technical here because I'm the last person to speak to this, but it was just curious to me that the answer was just flat out, no, we can't do it. And so I'm just curious around the thought process, like, did we consider using the brush to at least create some sort of path out there? Because effectively, once we have the snowfall, you know, our residents aren't using the dog park. They can't use it because they don't know where to go. It's dangerous, it's icy. And the dogs, you know, particularly for the smaller dogs, with that, they can't follow along. So can you just provide a bit more background around the path? I just found the answers very direct. We don't do it because we just rip up the thing. Like, can you just explain a little bit more how you came to that conclusion?
Mr. Lewicki, would you care to comment on that? There you go. Your mic's on.
Through the mayor to Councillor McGowan-Swain, we basically looked at it from the aspect of damage to the trails, as we indicated in the response. The other factor is that we really don't have the resources to do it. However, if council has a desire to try to find a solution to do that, we could go and we would have to look at contracted services to do that and look at what we could provide for a cost to provide that service.
Okay, thank you. And now's not the time to bring out that motion, but or discuss that in more detail. I would challenge whether we need to go to a contracted service. We've got the equipment, it just means changing the service levels. And so we'll get into that when we get into service levels, but I do appreciate the explanation there. So what I heard was it's not a no, because we'll rip up, that's part of the reason, but it's also a resourcing aspect, but it could be done.
Through the mayor to Councillor Monkoff-Swain, yes, there would be damage to the surroundings, as I mentioned, but also, like I said, the resource part of it, if we add that to our service levels, it is a commitment that we need to maintain in order to fulfill our requirements. So we currently don't have that ability to meet that service level requirement.
Okay, thank you. Then if it's okay, I'll get one more.
Follow up, yeah.
And sorry, I should have started off by saying, I thought the responses to these questions were extremely well done. Clearly a lot of thought had gone into them. So thank you for that to all of administration. Certainly, I noticed a significant improvement from last year's. So thank you for that. I think I won't speak on behalf of others, but the other questions that they asked, going through their responses, I thought was great. So thanks for putting the time and effort into it. Hopefully this speeds up the process. With that being said, on page 30 of the questions under fire, and a few people asked around this. So I'll get Mr. Melvin here on the proverbial hot seat. The challenge so what I don't quite understand here is, in the budget on page 28, you're recommending, go through and doing a whole service level review. And I can't help but think we paid all this money to do a fire service review, and now we're going, and we didn't really do too much with that. And now we're doing another review to look at all of our protective services. Could you just help me explain, are we just throwing out that old fire service review and redoing it because all over again? I can't help but get the feeling we're continuing to keep studying it as opposed to addressing the problem.
Mr. Melvin?
Through the mayor to Councillor Monkoff-Swain. One of the big challenges that I see from my seat is what is our level of service and what is it going to be moving forward, more than just the fire service, municipal enforcement, RCMP, protective services as a whole. Instead of picking and choosing and say, well, the fire service should be at this level, municipal enforcement at this level, we really don't have any data to say where we need to be. If presently where we're at is adequate, are we under, are we in line with neighbors who have experienced the same level of growth as we've had? The fire service is obviously, we presently know where we're at for staffing. That service level review is a very important document that I reference numerous times in developing responses back on the 23 budget. But we don't have anything for the other departments. The piece around the fire service review and the overall protective services review, we have some ideas where future fire stations should go. We have some timelines on, right now we're in that 4 to 6 year rotation, I guess, or view on where that document said we should be at for staffing levels, where we should be going for that. So the document itself is still very valuable, but I'm trying to look at it from an approach from protective services as a whole on where exactly we should be. So we're not coming back and one FTE here, one FTE there, and trying to juggle and say, okay, this is where we should be at for a level of service for a community our side, for protective services as a whole, and just not the fire service. So the document, no, it's still quite valuable, but I'm just trying to expand on that and include the other departments that I manage and look after. So.
Okay, and so first, thank you for the answer there. I'll save my questions around that once we get into that discussion. But if I could just make sure I heard what you said, the previous fire service review is going to help with your broader overall vision. And so administration is not recommending any FTEs right now until we do the bigger picture. And then they'll take a look at and see where they think is the best place to put those resources. Did I capture that correctly?
Presently, within the fire service review, there is some identifications of when we should be increasing staffing levels. But right now I'm trying to get a good grasp on what our level of service should be. When should we be going to 12-hour days with 12 hours a day, 7 days a week with full-time staff? At what point? Is it generated based on calls? Is it generated based on population? Is it generated based on risk? So all of this information we're trying to grab so that when I present that to council, we can have, once again, the data to support to say, this is when we should do it, instead of, we've had a big incident. Now we have to do a knee-jerk reaction and we have to hire all these staff, which we've seen recently that some municipalities have had to do because that's why I'm just trying to be proactive and get that information. So when I present it to you, it's just not my opinion. It's here's an expert in the field that provides us information to support what I'm trying to present. So that council can make that educated decision on what our level of service should be for protective services.
I appreciate that, and I'm with you. I like the approach. Just as someone who's not an expert in this field, when we see those HERF requirements that are in front of us, showing that we're behind, showing the concern around what insurance is going to do, et cetera, and then to see in the budget that there is no FTEs, like I don't quite understand that, but that's why you're there and not me. So I appreciate the background and look forward to coming back and seeing that overall picture. So thanks for the clarification. That's all I had, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Just a quick follow-up, Chief Melvin. If you don't mind, sorry, before we go to the other councillors. So the next study we're going to be looking at doing, your recommendation, will it be addressing the types of calls our firefighters get called to? I've heard different stories of when certain departments respond to certain calls, other departments don't. I'm not sure exactly if we track what your thoughts are. Are every call we're being called on to respond to, we should be responding to those calls? Is that part of the future idea of how we should be staffing our department, please? If you can enlighten that a little bit.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, protective services and if you're particularly looking at the fire service, we respond to a set of calls based on our level of service and training that our members have, depending on, once again, what the risk is in our community. If we didn't have any open water, if we didn't have any storm ponds, it would make absolutely not real sense to be training our members in something that they're never going to use. At the end of the day, we are constantly reviewing the calls that come in, the type of calls, to make sure the members are trained. Medical calls are somewhat different. We only respond to certain levels of medical calls. The smaller one, trips, falls, things like that are on a lower scale than the more readily calls that you need to respond to. So there's a large set of criteria on the number and type of calls that we respond to from a fire service perspective. Municipal enforcement will normally attend to any call if it's non-criminal in nature. Obviously, that would then go over to the RCMP for them to look after. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, it's very helpful. Thank you very much. I'll go to Councilor Cook. Kat, you have the floor.
Thank you. And to Councillor Monkoff-Swain's point, the responses were very thorough, so not a lot of questions for clarity. So appreciate that. I have one question for clarity, and it's actually surrounding one of Councillor Barnhart's questions on page 27 about the seed space. So considering the seed space, we're considering it for the corporate lease space. What would be the budgetary impact on using it versus looking at other lease spaces since we currently pay for the seed space? So we allocated $126K to corporate lease space. So would it still be that much if we use seed, or is that figure based on leasing somewhere else?
Mr. Blanco, would you care to, is he reaching for a mic there? I'm assuming you'll be answering that question. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So the intent was to address the growth needs of the city through adding office space. There is an existing lease with Seed. So in the interim, that cost would reflect transitioning that to a corporate pool, a new cost center, a new department, if you will, allocated towards leased facility space. So those contract costs would get absorbed into this new piece here.
Okay, thank you. That's it, Mayor. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Steve, before I go to you, I'm going to go to Councilor Miller to finish off the first round of questions. So Ashley, would you mind proceeding?
Sure. I apologize. I copy and pasted my question. Now I'm not sure what page it is in the budget, but it's AM 08. So I don't know if you can find that.
AM 08.
AM 08, yeah.
Different order. Hang on.
It's regarding the proposed service transformation initiatives. 16.
Page 16.
Yeah. Thank you, Sandy.
Yeah.
Anybody there? Okay.
Mhm.
So my question was with the proposed service transformation initiatives, specifically the enhanced citizen digital experience, what kind of strains will it add to the communications department, if any? The answer, I was just a little unclear in the answer. Are we saying that with the service experience office that will essentially lighten the load of communications? Yes. Yes, okay. So that is why there is no increase to the communications department. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, I'm just thinking here, if you don't mind, Councilor Van Newkirk, we're 5 minutes away from our library presentation. Perhaps we'll proceed with the library presentation and come back after dinner and start round 2 with yourself. Are you okay with that? Okay, okay, Steve, go ahead. Ask it then. Thanks.
Yeah, this one's just on page 29. I found another flag I had left for myself, and it was SV 20, municipal enforcement. The question was, I note an increase of 1 FTE. What positions being added in this budget cycle? It isn't clear to me. So the answer is that the school resource officer program is shifting to a municipal enforcement position. And so that was the answer. So my subsequent question to that is, are we adding personnel, or are we just shifting the current personnel that we have? Like, is there a hiring process that has to happen here, or is the existing school resource officer just going under an ME banner? So thank you.
Mr. Melvin.
Through the mayor to Councilor Van Newkirk. Presently, we don't have a school resource officer. The one that we had has moved on to another municipality. The school resource officer program or the school resource officer is a CPO level 1 currently within the municipal enforcement department. Looking overall at our service levels and trying to ensure that we have enough community peace officers out on the road interacting with the public. The plan is to shift the funding for that position to be funded by the 3 school boards and not by the municipality. So there would be an increase of 1 FTE, but the plan would be to ask the school boards to provide that funding, since primarily that's where the school resource officer is employed. And the school resource officer that we currently have right now, we would just remove that SRO designation off that and have a CPO level 1 that would be able to be out on the road. So that's where that decision was on that standpoint. So hopefully that clears up that. And it's only, it would only be funded if it was funded by the schools. That's another piece that has something to impact the budget. So,
yeah, great. Thank you. Appreciate the answer.
Okay. That concludes round 1 of questions. So with that, perhaps I'll invite our library guests to join us at the big podium here in front of you, and we'll We've got 30 to 40 minutes for your presentation. We're expecting 30, but if you go a little longer, within reason to, we should be okay. Means you're standing between this group and food after about 35, 40 minutes. So present at your peril at that length of time, but we'll do the library presentation. And so around 6:30, 6:35, we'll break for 15, 20 minutes for dinner, and we'll come back with round 2 of any question there may be with council questions. So with that, ladies, welcome to council yet again, Ms. Brennan, Ms. Whitten, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. So hello, Mayor Daniluk and council, and thank you for the opportunity to present the library's 2023 operating and capital funding request. The Beaumont Library's aspiration is to be a place for everyone to gather, learn, and explore, learn, and express themselves. We accomplish that vision by connecting people to ideas, experiences, and to one another using our programming, collections, space, technology, and staff. Before we dive into the 2023 budget request, we want to give some context and rationale for our request. So I'll pass it over to Laura to talk about our programs and services and how they're changing and evolving. Thanks, Sabrina.
And please have the mic towards you. They're very directional. So thank you.
Okay, good to know. I'm not a pro. Actually, I'll go back one slide if I could. Thanks. So 2020 was a really interesting year for us. It was really our first look at post-pandemic life and how and if things had shifted, and things have definitely shifted, at least the library. Some needs have changed and some have really only grown. In 2022, we saw our usage numbers for nearly all our services return to pre-pandemic levels. When we look at statistics across the year, there was a clear uptick in usage after March, and use has really just grown since then. So based on what we're seeing, we're on track to exceed pre-pandemic usage in nearly all services in 2023. Collections were no exception to this. Our collection is made up of the materials on our shelves that we lend free of charge to community members. And in 2022, we began a 3-year project to expand our collection size, and we're well on our way to achieving that goal with a 22% increase in our collection in 2022. Along with that larger collection and the continued loosening of pandemic restrictions, we saw increases in borrowing month over month throughout the year, and we're nearly back to our pre-pandemic usage rates. So we anticipate borrowing will continue on its current trend line as we grow and improve our collections, and we will exceed 2019 borrowing rates in 2023. Thank you. Programming is a cornerstone of the library's offerings to the community. 2022 was a really interesting year as we moved out of pandemic programming and back to a new normal. We saw shifts in how our community engaged with our programs and how they wanted to enjoy programming in a post-pandemic world. Our overall program numbers fell from 2021 as we moved away from virtual programming based on declining demand for that. But our in-person programming increased by 18%. And in the later months of 2022, we're seeing attendance numbers bounce back. Thank you. The library offers access to free, safe, welcoming space. Libraries are one of the only places people can come and just be without needing to spend any money. We know from our own community engagement and from engagement the city has done that spaces to hang out are at a premium in Beaumont, and we are one of the few public spaces that meet that need. Not surprisingly, we saw a huge uptick in library visits in 2022, 350%, in fact. Of course, keep in mind 2021, we were closed for some of the year, but still very impressive. We're nearly back to pre-pandemic rates for visits, and like with borrowing, there was a significant increase in visits later in the year. So we are expecting to exceed pre-pandemic visits in 2023. With more people in the building, we saw more demand for customer service, including our technology help, our readers advisory, and our reference services. So based on our 3 sample weeks, we estimate we will have answered 28,375 patron questions by the end of 2022. And that's actually a 105% increase from 2019, from pre-pandemic. The last bit of usage information I want to throw at you, I know it's a lot of numbers. This is the last one, and it's a big one. It's the household membership rate for Beaumont. So there are 2,547 households in Beaumont with an active library membership, and that's 36.6% of households in our community. We're really proud of that number, and we're very committed to increasing it. It's one of the focuses of our new strategic plan. So the library's had a busy year, and we're planning for an even busier year in 2023 with new services, more materials on our shelves, and hopefully an improved space to meet community needs.
The library board spent the fall of 2022 preparing a 2023 operating budget that allows us to catch up to the increased demand for services and gives us room to introduce new programming and expanded services in line with council's strategic plan. Looking back at 2022, we're proud to say that with the support of council, we met our budget priorities. We reorganized the library's staffing structure into departments with managers who oversee our major service area. This shift has allowed us to streamline processes for efficiency and develop new methods to track usage, understand community needs, and analyze for future trends. With a manager at the helm of our collections department and an increased collection budget, we've increased our collection size by 22%, as Laura mentioned. We did this all with a 4% increase in funding. We stretched every dollar and we built a solid foundation for efficient growth in services. Our 2023 budget was developed with 4 priorities in mind, each drawn from our strategic plan and designed to support council's aspirations for Beaumont. First, we will expand evening and weekend programming and increase school-aged programs. Second, we will introduce digital literacy and STEAM programming, so that's science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. Third, we are continuing with our collection expansion project with a plan to hit 27,500 items by the end of 2023. And finally, now that we've reviewed and optimized our operational structure, it's time to take a look at our governance and our HR to ensure that we have the policies we need to guide our work as we expand services. Our 2023 operating budget was developed with these priorities in mind. Our total budget for 2023 is projected at $1,274,700, an increase of $198,100 from our 2022 budget. Our funding request to the city is $1,134,400, a 22% or a $208,400 increase over 2022 funding. We know that this is a larger increase than we've requested in previous years. For the past 3 years, we've worked very hard to keep our increases low and to make do with less. This was possible during the pandemic because of closures and reduced use. We required fewer staff, so we budgeted for unfilled positions. In 2022, as you saw, usage bounced back and in fact is increasing. We can't leave positions unfilled anymore, and we need to continue the work that we were doing pre-pandemic to gradually increase our FTE. It isn't always obvious how our strategic priorities map to the line items on a budget, so we wanted to give an illustration of how the increases you're seeing support the priorities we've laid out. The largest line item increase is, not surprisingly, staffing. Filling all the positions and increasing hours for our managers will allow us the staff we need to add evening and weekend programs, complete the additional collection work that comes with having more materials, and do all of this while maintaining adequate staffing for our front desk. In order to continue to increase our collection size, we need more funds to purchase materials. Introducing STEAM and digital literacy programs requires equipment and technology, adding to our operating costs. We will hire a consultant to complete our review and update our policies and governance model, and those costs are recorded under operating. Finally, you'll see an increase totaling of $46,500 in the city service and building costs. This increase does not reflect increased services from the city to the library. Rather, city administration is working to increase transparency in costing internal departments and the library. These increases provide a more accurate representation of the staff time city administration puts into supporting the library. They're in and out costs and do not affect the tax levy. So before we move on to our capital request, we wanted to provide a quick slide showing you the per capita cost of library services over the past 10 years compared to the per capita cost if funding had matched inflation. When we talk about per capita costs, we're looking at how much the library is costing the city per community member. So the blue line shows our actual per capita funding for library services based on the grant we received from the city. And the green line shows what library funding per capita would have been if it had risen to meet with inflation. The library's funding per capita has fallen since the beginning of the pandemic. Our 2023 request will bring us closer to the per capita funding that meets inflation, all while we add new services and expand existing services.
Thanks, Aruna. The library has submitted a capital funding request for 2023 in addition to our operating request. This project is currently unfunded, so we're hoping we can convince you guys of the value and return on investment of the project. We're calling this the Community Gathering Space Project because the primary objective is to meet the community's need for functional, comfortable spaces to gather by addressing issues with the current library space. We also really love solving multiple problems with a single solution. So we're going to use innovative curved shelving to divide the space and create those nooks and crannies and comfortable gathering spaces. And by using shelving to do that, we'll meet our secondary objective of continuing to expand our collection. And then finally, we'll ensure our new gathering and workspaces are functional using noise mitigation solutions like baffles and sound clouds to create loud and quiet zones. So why do we need this space? Libraries are vital community gathering spaces, especially in a winter city. We offer free, safe, accessible space, and our other services, our books, magazines, toys, technology, study spaces, seating, are all designed to invite people to hang out in our space. To fulfill our promise as a community hub, we need a physical space that supports gathering, where people feel a sense of invitation and comfort and want to stick around. As council is aware, we have significant space issues at the library. We're less than half the size we should be to serve our current population, but it's not just that we don't have enough space. We know both as experts in library space planning and from feedback from our community that our facility presents some real challenges for people looking for a space to hang out. We regularly hear from patrons that the library is too noisy, that people feel exposed in the large open space, that they worry their children are making too much noise, and that studiers have trouble concentrating because of all the background sound. As a result, we see a pattern of community use where most patrons don't linger in our space. Patrons tend to come to find a book or pick up their holds or attend a program. They complete their task, and when they're finished, they leave. We really don't like this pattern. We want patrons to come into the space to complete a task and then stick around because it's just a lovely place to hang out. We want people to think of the library when they're setting up a group meeting or planning coffee with a friend or trying to decide where they want to hang out with their kids. So we know we have issues. We have a vision for what we want the space to be, but how do we get there and what is it going to look like? We've spent the last few months working with vendors to develop and cost a plan for the space that uses creative shelving, furniture, and noise control solutions to create the community gathering space we want. Our plan is to transform the central area of the library, shown in this picture as it is today. As you can see, this space currently houses some display shelves and some study tables. The current display shelving is old and it's starting to break, and the space is very open, and it doesn't really feel like a space to hang out and browse. Can I just get you to click? There we go. We're going to replace that shelving with much more functional curved shelving that creates an inviting bookstore feel and draws patrons into this space, inviting them to explore. What you see here is an early render of what the space would look like from the same perspective the photo of the current space was taken. You can see the curved shelving breaking up the space and inviting patrons to wander and stick around. This is our current planned layout for the area. We will replace our current computer stations and study desks with 3 separate tables spaced throughout the area for more privacy. Because we will be adding lots of new shelving, we're going to remove some of the existing larger shelving so that we can expand the area around our fireplace and create a really large new gathering space. New soft seating will make this area a comfortable, inviting zone so that once people meander through our shelving, they want to sit down with the books they found and stick around. Next slide, thanks. Renders and floor plans only go so far. So here are a couple photos of libraries with the shelving we're planning to use. You can see how it creates those wander paths and really breaks up the space, drawing you in and inviting you to browse. And then the final piece of the puzzle is the acoustic solutions that will reduce that noise transfer. So we'll use acoustic panels on the walls throughout the library to absorb sound. We will also target noisier spaces like the children's area and the circulation desk and the new gathering space with ceiling clouds and baffles. And the images on these slides are examples of how these treatments have been used quite beautifully in libraries. So it all looks great, right? What's it going to cost? The total project cost is $360,000. This includes capital costs for shelving, furniture, and noise mitigation strategies, and then $150,000 in operating impact costs to purchase collections to fill all those new shelves. The library really believes in the importance of this project, so we've committed our entire capital reserve in the amount of $150,000 to completing this work, and we're hoping the city will partner with us to cover the difference, which amounts to $210,000. I want to note that as we considered how to address issues in the current space, we were mindful of the fact that the city and the library are planning for a new or an expanded space. We are very excited to continue this work, but we recognize that it is a few years in the future and we need solutions more immediately. We wanted to make sure that none of the funds that went into those right now solutions would be wasted if we were to leave or expand the building. So all the solutions I showed you today would be able to move with us into a new space or just continue to work for us in an expanded space. This project, if approved, would be completed in 2023. We're ready to go with RFPs and vendors in January. And finally, if council were to commit funding, we would be applying for grants, including the Community Facility Enhancement Program grant from the Government of Alberta.
So on behalf of the library board and staff, I want to thank council for the opportunity to present the library's work and share our 2023 operating and capital budget requests. As always, we're grateful for the support of council and city administration, and we're excited to continue to offer Beaumontonians opportunities to explore, discover, and connect in 2023. We both welcome any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies, for that presentation. Very interesting project. You see it on the piece of paper, but you see it in the proposal. It does give it some life, and I appreciate the vision you have for the library and your patience with the new building facility, that kind of thing. I recognize the fact that it's been on your radar for a while and ours as well too as a council. So before I have any comments of my own, I will go to council first, as I usually do for questions and comments. So Councilor Monkoff-Swain, Sam, you have the floor first, followed by Councilor Tessier. Go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, first of all, thanks. As always, you guys do an amazing job of connecting your asks to what you're actually looking for. So it's a great job. I always enjoy the updates here. A couple of things. First, I'll just share. My oldest was able to get her first card through that juvenile program at 8, so she got very excited about that, and subsequently was late to bring her first book back, but we don't need to go there. So apologies for that. The first item I had, and I'll get to your capital ask, but the first question that I've had from a lot of parents and within our own family is on the weekends. You talk about increased programming, right? On the weekends, you're opening at 11. A few of us here have kids who get up much earlier than that, and there's nothing to do in Beaumont before then. And like I had parents come in who are asking, like, well, we would love to take our kids to the library at 8, 9, 10, just somewhere to go, right? Get out of the house. Have you considered that? Obviously, there's a staffing impact and that sort of thing, but maybe just speak a little bit about on the weekends if we've thought about opening up that space.
Yeah. We would love to be able to open on the weekends. It does have a huge staffing impact. And of course, staffing is our major cost. So right now we are open from 11 to 4. Would we like to open at 9 or 10? Yeah, but we need a little more money. Like really, that is what it is. When we do look at our usage patterns, which we can do now because we have much better visit data, we don't see as high usage on the weekends. So in terms of pushing for that, maybe we would get it if we were open earlier in the morning. But when we look at the balance of things, it's those after school hours that where we tend to see the real spikes in usage.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think, and obviously, you know this better than anyone in the room. I hear a lot of folks say, like, if it was available. So, not for today, but I'm considering going through and asking for that request to figure out what that would look like, what the operational cost would be, even on a trial basis, to see what we could do and advertise it and that sort of thing. So that was kind of point one. So stay tuned on that one, but appreciate the answer. Can I jump to my second piece?
Yeah, capital question, sure.
On the capital side. And I'll try not to tip my hat here, but I'm pretty much of an open book. The $360,000 ask, it's framed in here as an operational impact cost. So I just want to be triple clear here, and maybe this question for Mr. DeBlanco. This is still a capital. If we were to fund this would come out of grants. And so, yes, there is an operating impact, but there's no impact to the operating budget. Is that and if you can answer that, Laura, then feel free, but
I'm gonna pass that one
yeah.
on.
The ask is 360. So on page 113 of the budget, it says 360,000, 210 for capital costs, and then 150,000 for operational costs. So can we provide, does this come out of one of our grant opportunities, or would this impact the tax levy?
Mr. Blanco?
Thanks for the question. So I'm making sure I understand it as well. In terms of grant funding that the city could provide, this is likely lower than the city would be able to put through its own grant program for something like MSI or Canada Community Building Fund. The obvious funding source for something like this would be something like a pay-as-you-go. And to do that, we'd have to increase the pay-as-you-go allocation, which, yes, would then in turn increase taxes. In terms of what is capital versus what is operating, that's going to depend on what the library itself does capitalize, whether it's capitalizing books. This is accounting jargon here. I won't bore you, but the capitalization threshold for the library is going to be much lower than the city because it's a smaller entity.
So if I heard you correctly, you don't think like that that's something that we could pay through MSI or the new federal gas tax at 360,000. I know the ask is a little bit less than that, but I'll get to that in a second. What I heard you saying is that you don't think that we could use those grants for that purpose. Is that right?
The project itself would not likely qualify for an MSI or a CCBC or a Canada Community Building Fund just based on dollar amount. And I'd have to look at the program guidelines themselves, but for things like shelving and books, that would also probably be lower than or not within program guidelines. So if the city were to support this ask, we'd utilize a different funding source, one that we would have a little bit more control over, like pay as you go.
Okay, but you understand the impact of that in terms of a pay as you go versus MSI. I struggle around, MSI and without trying to cheat the system here. Like we've approved capital projects from MSI for less than $360,000. I understand, your own capitalization policy around books and shelves and all that sort of stuff. And so I don't quite understand why this couldn't be capitalized. So maybe I'll maybe give you a chance to answer it again, or if not, have a chance to think it through and maybe get it in writing just so that I can understand it a bit better.
Yeah, hopefully I can provide a little more clarity. The funding source the city would recommend would be pay as you go. In terms of keeping not affecting the tax levy, what would then be asked is to ask council, is there something that is currently funded from pay as you go that would fall off then?
Yeah, no, I understand the pay as you go piece. And what I don't understand is how this doesn't fit within MSI, how this doesn't fit within the federal grant process. And is there a way to get creative here and call it something else that could fall under MSI and then, let these ladies figure that out without getting in too much trouble?
The MSI piece is a dollar amount. So once again, if it was the intent of council to fund the project, what administration would do is then look at what the best mechanism for funding it is.
Okay. No, that does help. And just quickly then, is there, what is the threshold amount for MSI?
It's approximately 300,000.
Okay, I'll leave it there. And if you guys can come up with more things to hit that threshold, then I welcome that.
More money?
Right.
We can do that.
Yeah, so we'll get into this when we get into capital, but I see tremendous value here, particularly around the noise transfer piece. I'm sure my 3-year-old contributes to 90% of that noise in that little space. So yeah, looking forward to getting into that debate, and I'll tip my hat in advance for administration to see if we can get creative on how we could potentially capitalize something like that. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I go to the next speaker, I also, Mr. Blanco and Mr. Dowler, I was assuming any other capital projects could be funded out of MSI or the Canada Community Building Fund in the form of gas tax. So I would be interested in finding out if we, as part of our capital operating capital budget discussion, a little more of an idea how we could consider funding, not just other things too. So thank you, that Councillor Swain. So I'll go to Councillor Tessier, followed by Councillor Miller, followed by Councillor McCook. Renee, and I see Councillor Barnhart, you have your hand up, so I haven't forgot about you. You're next on, you're on my list as well.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks for the presentation. It was helpful to see all this data. Just two questions. The first one's on library services. So from your graph here, it looks like there's a good amount of programming, but it's not fully met by, you know, total participants in filling those programs. So why would we increase programs and FTEs if we're not filling the current ones?
So what I will say to that is that programming attendance fell significantly during the pandemic for a bunch of different reasons. And in 2022, we actually couldn't increase the number of, we didn't increase back to the full number of participants that we were used to having in our program. So we kept that quite low. We had staff who were uncomfortable. We knew parents were uncomfortable and they didn't want crowded rooms. So we didn't go back to our full programming capacity until the fall of 2022. So you have a full half year where we were keeping that capacity really, really low on purpose. The other thing that I will say is we are looking at our usage across the different programs that we are offering. And what we're seeing is that those school age service programs, particularly the ones in the evenings and the weekend, they are full with massive wait lists. Our early literacy programming, its attendance rates have fallen and haven't quite recovered yet. So what we're doing in 2023 is pulling back on some of those early literacy programs and increasing the number of school age programs so that we can meet the demand there. And it's something we hear regularly in our early literacy programs. Parents will say, well, great, now my kids are in school. What can I do with you guys now? So we're saying, okay, well, now we need to follow the community as they age and we need to increase those.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense. The second part is visits. So obviously it's about, you know, pandemic before and we're expecting it to rise and keep rising due to the population increases.
Mm-hmm.
So those, what are we expecting in 2023? Because obviously we're asking for more people and more programs. I don't see the data to support it right now in my, like, from these graphs. So I'm just wondering, like, what are your thoughts on that a little bit, and what are your expectations of 2023?
Yeah. So I didn't bring it with me, but I do have a graph that looks month to month through 2022 and looks at that pattern of visits rising and the pattern of borrowing rising. So one of the things that you see in when you sort of bunch it all together into a single year, you just see that total number. But if you look across 2022, you'll see that starting in March, we have a climb. So if I were to take the last 3 months of 2022 and then average those for what we would expect in 2023, I'm thinking we're going to be in the 65 to 70,000 range for visits. We'll see if that pans out. And then the other thing that we are doing is, again, increasing that weekend and evening program with the expectation that that is going to bring more bodies in. One of the major drivers of our visits is programs. People come for programs and then they stick around and they borrow and they use our resources. We haven't had the staffing to expand outside of that 9 to 5 hour, which is a huge limitation for lots of families in Beaumont. As we start to increase that and we do those evening and weekend programs, I am expecting that is going to drive up visits and demand for services.
I would tend to agree with you, especially during the school year. It's limited, obviously, for that. Yeah. And you answered my other capital questions on being able to move all the equipment and resources to the future building. So yeah, thanks so much.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Miller, followed by Councillor Cook, followed by Councillor Barnhart, and then round 2 will begin. So Ashley, you have the floor.
Thank you guys for coming. Always great to hear from you. Love how you're so prepared. You know all that. First of all, please get rid of my late fees. That would be wonderful. I'm just kidding. Okay, so Sam or Councillor Munkoff-Swain, you kicked it off. I think when you talked about you mentioned the programming on weekends. So in the unfunded part of the library operating budget, this is what kind of struck me, is that in order for them to move forward with things such as the increased evening and weekend programming, that amount is necessary. And Laura, you can maybe elaborate on that, but those things are needed. I fully believe that as well. Opening at 11, it would be great to open at 8 o'clock in the morning and have that programming, but without the funding. So I have I would like you to elaborate on that as to why, those 3 points. Collection size, not going to happen without the funding. Weekend, evening programming, also the same thing in digital literacy program. So if you could elaborate on that, then I have a question after that.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, sorry, page 37 for everyone who's,
37.
yeah.
So when it comes to collection size, there's a couple components of that. Obviously, you just need more money to buy more books, but the larger your collection gets, the more staff you need to manage that collection to do the purchasing. So when we look at moving from having $36,000 a year to buy books to having $76,000 a year, we need more staff to do that purchasing. So there's a staffing impact there. Evening and weekend programming, I think that one's pretty straightforward. We can't do it unless we have the staff to do it. Running programs pulls staff away from the front desk. We need to make sure that we're filling those positions as well. And now I'm losing the.
No, that's
basically the digital literacy and STEAM programming. Yeah. There's challenges with staffing in terms of that as well, because it requires some training to get your staff up to speed and able to do those sorts of things.
Correct.
So there's really staffing impacts across all of our priorities. We've tried to keep them minimal, but realistically, we can't do it without more people.
And I think if I can add to, so, we've really worked on our budget to prioritize these things and put it in. And, as always, council can approve part or a whole of what we're asking for. And if we don't get the whole of what we're asking for, I think that's what you're asking, we would have to make those decisions about what we aren't going to accomplish and what priorities we're going to put on hold.
Okay, so basically what I'm hearing is those 3 initiatives that are really very important as a part of the growth of the library, just to maintain service, are not going to move forward as an unfunded line in the municipal budget or in the operating budget.
That's correct.
That's my first thing I wanted to clarify. And secondly, I guess my question for Curtis or whoever can answer this is, why was the increase, the full increase, not approved by admin?
Mr. Blanco? Yeah, you're on.
Thanks for the question. So as outlined in kind of administration's budget process, we get submissions from departments and we get submissions from external groups such as the library. We evaluate priorities, go through the list of items and pick the best ones that administration can put forward the best budget for the city. The library's ask is substantial, both in percentage and dollar amount. We've looked at the asks from the library the past number of years. 2021, I believe both the city administration and the library proposed 0 increases, and that was done. Last year, libraries was slightly higher than the cities, and the 2 years prior, the libraries were slightly higher. The library can ask for what they feel they need is required to either operate or expand their services. The city didn't, or city administration didn't really exercise any judgment on their ask itself, other than just to reflect that it would be a similar amount to what the city is asking at 7%.
Okay. I guess further to this, when we talk about the community gathering space, so we're Councillor Monkoff-Swain kind of hit on the funding potential options, which I'm not rehearsed in all the grants and how all those work. Is there options potentially for this amount as well? What would that look like?
Mr. Blanco?
If I understand the question specific to capital, and I'll just keep it short. If council is supportive of a capital project, administration will figure out the best mechanism to fund a capital project. So rather than get into MSI program guidelines and pay as you go and whatnot, if council is supportive of a capital project, we will shift funding sources between other projects to make a project have a funding source.
Yeah. Okay. I understand. And thank you for the answer.
Councilor Miller, was your part of your question possibly offering more than 99,100 on page 9 for operating? Is that your question? I thought you were going that direction, but on operating. No?
Was I asking to offer more?
Yeah, on operating.
I'm not following what you're asking.
Okay, no, it's okay. I thought you
Okay.
were going some direction. No problem.
Yeah.
You're good then?
I think so. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Good for right now. Councilor McCook, you're next, followed by Councilor Barnhart. Kat?
Thank you. I think some of my question was clarified by Councillor Miller. First of all, you guys offer invaluable services to our city, and it's always impressive that you guys do what you do with what you have. So my question was around what is the impact of not funding the full amount in the operating budget? So you did kind of clarify that. So what would you prioritize?
So, you know, as the administrator for the library, I don't make those final decisions. I would make recommendations to the board about what we would prioritize. I know that my recommendations would likely be to cut collection spending for sure. I think that the evening and weekend programming is absolutely fundamental. Like we really, really need to get there. And the STEM programming sort of comes hand in hand with that because that's what the demand is from the community. So I would be looking at a recommendation around considering reduced hours.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. That's it, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Barnhart. Kathy?
Thank you very much. And thank you both ladies for the presentation. I wish I could be there in person to see you. But the conversation has been exactly the one that I kind of had in mind we needed to have. I guess the concern I have is that it's not our place to be telling the library board what to do with the money that you receive, but it is our place to determine how much that is. And that's really difficult for us because we don't, you know, we don't want to put you in jeopardy, but at the same time, we don't have an endless pot, as you well know. So I don't know what that magic number is. And I'm hoping that we can come to some conclusion as a group here. Probably not right now. The other point that I wanted to ask about, because I don't really have an answer for the first part of this, is regarding provincial advocacy and the increases in the grants from the province. It looks to me like that has not really moved anywhere, and I can't remember when the last time was there was a library grant increase. Could you maybe speak to that, and is it potentially something that we as city councilors could do in that regard to support you in that endeavor?
You're right on top of things there, Councillor Barnhart. We haven't had an increase in our provincial funding since 2016. We are funded based on population, and the government of Alberta has let us know that they're going to continue to use the 2016 population numbers. So we're not expecting another increase. There are advocacy efforts underway that are being led by a couple of the regional library systems, including the one we're a part of, the Yellowhead Regional Library. They're doing some really amazing work prepping advocacy. I will be coming back to council in 2023 to talk to you guys about your participation in those advocacy efforts. We're just not quite at the point where it's solidified and we're ready to move forward, but it's forthcoming in 2023.
Thank you. I really do appreciate that. And I do think that that is where we as a council need to go on your behalf. If we don't, you know, not if we don't, but considering how much money we have to provide you with all of the things that need to be done, it's likely we can't give you everything that you've asked for just because we don't have enough money to do all of the things that we need to do for the entire city. But I really do support what you're doing, and I know council is very much aware of our role and how we need to support you. So I do appreciate that. Thank you. That's my question.
Thank you, Councillor. So before we go to round two, sorry, off from Councillor McGough-Swain, my only question is on the capital request of the community gathering space. I know you're willing to commit 150,000 on your capital reserve toward that project. That'll deplete it to zero, I believe you said in your presentation. Again, not saying how you should spend your money, but are you comfortable with that commitment? It seems like it's the whole enchilada, which is not a bad thing, but just to put in perspective, the board and you were comfortable with that. I like how you always come with solutions and willing to put some skin in the game, as the saying goes, and that is a fair bit. So are you comfortable with that sort of suggestion?
Yeah,
I'm assuming you are, but just ask the question.
Yeah, we do have a small operating reserve as well, so we're not without any funds. If disaster strikes, we have some funds to keep us safe there. But I think our thinking and the board's thinking was, this is what the capital reserve is for. It's for projects that help us serve the community. This is absolutely the most urgent need for the library right now, and so why would we hold back on this? We need to get it done.
I appreciate the clarification. So round two, Councillor McGough-Swain, Sam.
Yeah, and I really don't want to, so Curtis, just if the question is misguided, just say so and feel free not to answer it. Because you mentioned that if we want to fund this, you guys will figure out a funding source. I just can't get past you talked about a cap for MSI and you don't need to dive into that. But like I see on here, like the dog park, 115,000, that's funded by grants. So how does that get funded by grants, but not this? So don't answer it now if it's going down a rabbit hole, but like 115,000 here, we got 350 here. I can't wrap my mind around that.
Your mic's on, Curtis.
I'll
give you
start
one more
off
second.
with saying that it would be unlikely that the city would recommend using the MSI pool to fund this. And I'll come back to the statement saying, if this is a capital ask that council is supportive of, the city will utilize a different mechanism to fund it. I think I understand the ask better. And the library, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the ask of the city is for 70,000 for shelving, 40,000 for noise mitigation. So about 110,000 for real capital equipment, and then 100,000 is for collection, so books to fill those shelves, correct?
Yeah.
Which is a one-time operating component as kind of the terms we use as the city. So in short, we wouldn't recommend it for MSI. Coming back to your original question on why is the dog park in, the city's able to group kind of like for like assets to submit a grant application. So a lot of the asks in the capital budget are for parks and park space enhancements in the Centerville and kind of downtown area. We'd be able to group that into a larger pool, and it's around $1 million in the capital budget. So it's well beyond that threshold. Hopefully that answers.
No, it really does. Thank you. I promise I won't ask it again here. We'll get into it and the recommended funding sources when we get into that capital ask. I appreciate that and sorry to take up your time.
If I could just say something too, I know the operating impact is a piece that is weird as well, but if we also look at the dollar amount, if we just stuck with the shelving and furniture and noise mitigation strategies, which are more capital-like, and then the library could always cover the book piece. It's just a different way to look at it as well.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the presentation here. I'm thinking, yeah, I know where you're going with that. I know how to, yeah, we can figure this out. Mr. Blanco was very creative as Mr. Dowler on finding ways to, creative and very appropriate ways to find funding, not inappropriate ways. Let me clarify that to be sure. But we do appreciate their efforts to be creative when we need them to. So having seen no further questions from council, ladies, again, I appreciate, as is council, you coming to see us today and clarifying the ask somewhat and also clarifying the capital ask as well. It did help me to understand a bit more what's going on. And we do appreciate the fact the library is patient with expansion and you recognize the financial difficulties we're under and at the same time you come with solutions too, which is always nice to see, much appreciated. So with that, I believe we can now break for our dinner break. It's 6:40, so we'll reconvene at 7 o'clock to continue on with our budget workshop. Thank you all. See you in 20 minutes.